Hello, Dumelang, and welcome to yet another episode of Motlhophi BUA. Vote to Speak. My name is Dumisa Mote, the host of this selection podcast that is brought to you by Bokongo in partnership with Duma FM and the Embassy of the United States of America in Gaborone. So today we're going to be continue the conversation on analyzing manifestos as we edge closer to the 2024 national elections. But this time around, we're going to be looking at a certain very key, interesting, and crucial aspect of manifestos, in that we're going to be looking to see what they say based on or looking or regarding issues of gender-based violence as well as human rights in general. So today I have a packed conversation that I'm going to be getting into, and I'd like for you to know who I'm going to be engaging on this issue. I have here in studio Lesego Nchunga, who is many things, but today is a voter. How are you doing, Lesego?
On human and people's rights, on the rights of women, which advance gender equality. But you look at us as a state, there's so much variances in terms of equal opportunities, in terms of equality, just generally substantive equality, right? You think of issues related to access to land, access to ownership of productive land, right? Those are issues that are still quite problematic. And so you get a sense that although we're ratifying, we're doing the right thing in terms of ratifying the standards at international level, when it comes to domesticating them and making them kind of domestic instruments that we can then hold our government accountable for, there's a gap there. You spoke about gender-based violence, and I think that's quite a big problem. We are known as the rape nation of the world. You know, we've taken the record from South Africa, unfortunately. And the rate of intimate partner violence in our country is so horrendously high, right? So embarrassingly high. But you look at our laws and there's space for that. Our sexual offences laws don't provide for a comprehensive definition of what sexual assault is. And so sexual assault doesn't extend to, for example, sexual touching. So if you touched somebody or spoke to them, right, we don't problematize that. But some people will be quiet because of the fear that they're in, right? So I think that we find ourselves in terms of the state of human rights and gender equality or gender-based violence, where it's quite complex. There's a lot of instances where we're doing the right thing. You know, we have recognized as a country that there is a crisis in terms of gender-based violence, and, you know, magistrates' courts are given a mandate to adequately and effectively deal with domestic violence or gender-based violence cases. But even in the enforcement of laws, where we are lacking.
Right.
Yeah.
She said a mouthful. I mean,
Yes, she did.
This kind of goes back to my first introduction of her as just being a voter. We can already get a sense of, you know, some of her forte. Now let's look at. Do you agree? First of all,
I
Mr. Nakhatli,
definitely,
do you agree?
I definitely agree with what Melissa has already placed out on the table, and I find it very interesting to actually point out that in the last round of the Afrobarometer data of round 9, you would find that Botswana at 99.92% actually would agree with you to say that there are those disparities in issues of inequality, and they're not just inequality as a broader topic, but also legal inequalities that have actually made it very difficult for us to further talk or tackle issues economically, better yet socially, like you've already stated. So this on its own has indirectly suggested that we have poor representation in laws, in the identification of roles of men and women, as well as other genders that are actually there. We've already mentioned decriminalization was done, yes, but there's a long way to go, because we're talking about one of the marginalized groups in our community. And it will be interesting because I know as we go further, we're going to discover that that marginalization could potentially be intentional in the political landscape because of the fear of the society and how it's going to be looking at people in leadership.
Right.
Yeah. So, like as she has already stated, there is a lot on the table that we would need to unpack when it comes to gender as well as human rights issues. There is a lot to uncover. Though we do consent from international legislation on
Implementation or domestication, a byproduct of political will. What does it reflect about the current state in terms of the will to attend to issues of equality, the will to attend to issues pertaining to human rights? So let's look at it from that perspective. In terms of the political will to uplift issues of gender, to give due attention to issues of human rights.
I mean, having read some of the manifestos, I think there is an interest. I'm curious, though, about whether there's a will, whether we can say that there's a will, right? You find that some of the manifestos, yes, will contextualize the challenges, but all of them will talk about mainstreaming gender. All of them will talk about, so there's a recognition that there are challenges, that there are problems, and a lot of those problems are gendered, right? But when it comes to the solutions that are offered, it seems or it feels as if the thinking is not complete. There's a lot that goes unaddressed. There's a lot that has not necessarily been sat down with and thought through in much a similar way as other issues, right? So when it comes to gender, it's almost like it's, it takes a back seat. It's a footnote. It's a by the way. Okay, let's just add it in there so that
to look at, like you're saying, manifestos. To what end are they speaking to this issue? Are they speaking directly to issues of gender rights, human rights, or is it just kind of like a peripheral conversation that is happening, that is maybe kind of alluding to issues of gender and human rights, but not speaking directly, so that there's no misunderstanding or there's no ambiguity of the message?
I would say that most of the manifestos of parties are more centralized on enhancing gender equality, looking at a socio-economic aspect. In that sense, it becomes easy. I mean, you can tally that with how you're going to create jobs and how they actually enhance women, and talk about low wages and how they can best be tackled so that women can be empowered and finally come to a point where we can push towards our margins of equality. But the real critical gender issues are things that you would not really find in the manifestos of parties. Rare the cases, violence becomes violence, and it becomes a general arbiter where we are saying, no, we will enforce the laws, like she's already stated, that we will increase sentences, we'll make them harsh. You already find such phrasings within our manifestos. But then you would see also in some of the party manifestos that they acknowledge that there is patriarchy in our societies, but then they don't go deep.
Certain issues that are complex by nature are dealt with in a complex manner. Is there that appetite as you peruse through a manifesto? Are you expecting to find exactly how some of those complexities are going to be dealt with?
Talking specifically to people who are active, myself, you would be taking a manifesto. You're looking for prospects that deal with gender. And you definitely want, if not a slim shot, of the mechanism, the implementation, synopsis of how you're going to go about addressing the gender issues, then give me a platform like this, a debate where you are bringing all party members here and you're asking them particularly on this issue. For someone who is an activist, for someone who is knowing that in a rural place, as we speak, they are still enduring the same sexual assault that they've been experiencing from the past 10 years. And we are looking at elections. What is it that could promise the future of that young child in the rural areas? The nature of our manifestos, they are made in such a way that they're brief. We run with the catch of what is the main story that the party is trying to tell. But it is very important to realize that for
I mean, we have talked extensively, I think. We'll return to the topic, but human rights. We're talking about freedom of association, right to life. We're talking about right to privacy, even though I don't know to what extent some of these are actually expressed within the manifestos. Right? These are base and fundamental rights. So one would think that they should be pervasive throughout the manifestos. Is that the case? Is that what you have seen?
From my reading, there are manifestos that have kind of framed themselves as having the Bill of Rights, which is, let me start here.
Right.
So in terms of the Constitution of Botswana, the Bill of Rights is the place where we will find our rights articulated. You know, you mentioned the right to life. There's also the right to vote, the right to privacy, freedom of association and expression, the right to dignity. Those are all entrenched in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. There are manifestos which have said the Bill of Rights is the core, right, of the Constitution and of the manifesto. And when we take up power in the next elections, or if we do, we will ensure that the Bill of Rights is the first place we start to extend critically, right, in having an understanding of what that looks like for, with a gendered view or from a gendered perspective, with a gendered lens.
Right. And your thoughts on that? Now we're looking at the topic of human rights. And they go to right to a free and fair trial, Audi Alteram Patent. I think just to rope you in there. so such things. How vocal are these manifestos on? Or maybe since we can agree that those are fundamental rights,
yes,
perhaps we should look at how they are vocalizing the protection or the promotion of these rights.
It's quite interesting. The bulk of the manifestos are talking on socioeconomic rights. And I've already stated that you find that it is an easier thing to tackle because in one of the agendas is job creation, one of the nation's most, problematic crisis that we have today. How to protect the fundamental rights, now shifting from what we've already established as the socio-economic rights,
Right.
the general rights are more silent. They are more silent. And you find that in an approach to talking about rights, you would hear them say, our approach is in human rights to promote development.
Right. I want to in trying to expand our conversation a little bit more. When looking at, for example, if you look at the presidential candidate debates in the United States of America, you tend to now appreciate some of these contentious issues, controversial issues, where now we're not just looking at the rights themselves. Now we are delving deeper into the expression or manifestation of those rights in a social life, right? So, for example, do we see manifestos taking a hard line in terms of certain issues, such as abortion, certain issues such as euthanasia, issues of physician-aided suicide? Are we seeing that kind of expressiveness in terms of the conversation around human rights?
No, I don't think we are. And I think what we've come to realize, right, is that a lot of our politicians don't want to engage in issues that may cause voter alienation. And so things that are perceived to be controversial, they'd rather stay away from. But you've got in the penal code, you gave the example of abortion. Abortion, it's permitted under certain circumstances. But we know, Botswana was delivering its universal periodic review report last year, and we know that there are so many incidences of unsafe abortions. Why do we not see under the manifesto's provisions and thinkings around reproductive rights and health anything about abortion? Because it's a
conversation that, I'll let you finish, but in talking about the elephant in the room, it's not as if it disappears when we go towards elections. So what's the treatment of issues of that nature that are it's public knowledge, right? That we are living in a different era where people are becoming more expressive with their sexuality. People are coming out and sharing with the world where they stand. So in terms of LGBTQI plus and their treatment, the community's treatment during a time of elections, right? Again, how expressive are the manifestos?
Would you like to? Should I go?
Let me add on to what you have already said, and we go back to our answer. No. Controversial issues are a no-go zone for any politician who runs the risk of losing the dominant and common voters, which in this case is our societies, which believe in religion and don't believe in controversial behavior, associations, anything that has to do with what is not normal, what they term not normal. So you find that in our very own manifestos, you're not going to find anyone articulating LGBTQI communities. There's nothing on them. There's nothing on them. The term marginalized groups, it talks about youth, it talks about women, it talks about children.
Right.
That is what is defined as marginalized. Otherwise, if you're talking about refugees, if you're talking about LGBTQI community, forget. Right. It's a fear of losing votes. So you forgo a community which you think the vast of our community has ignored. Mind you, you're talking about a community that is growing. Every day someone is discovering what I like.
Thank you. Realistically, right, Botswana is not an island, and we've seen that kind of rhetoric across the continent and across, the world, where legislators don't want to engage on polarizing issues, including the protection of the rights of LGBT persons, despite the fact that the rights that everybody's asking for the enforcement of and the protection of are embedded in our constitutions, right? But I think at the heart of it is kind of moralizing legal issues, right? And I don't think it's just isolated to LGBT persons. But I think the issue of morality makes it subjective, right? And moves us away from the real fundamental principles in our human rights. What is equality? Where does equality come from? What is justice? Right.
when you were going through the manifestos, right? Did you get a sense of the core values and principles of each political party as you were going through their respective manifestos? Did you get a sense of predictability, consistency, political identity? And all of this is kind of gravitating to this concept of political ideology, where you get a sense of who that party is and what they stand for, and if at all their leadership is the one that is at the forefront of whatever it is that's been said, you get a sense of what the leadership is about as well. Would you say, in essence, political ideology, does it come out? Because it does tie into what we're talking about.
I would say it does, just not explicitly. I think, I don't know if it's a mindset thing where we're thinking we've outgrown saying the ideology at the intro and coming down to speaking about our values, down to what we have for you as citizens within our community. I'm going to say that it is in a hidden way because again, I've studied under politics, and you'd find that you would have to know what a political party may be standing for and the like. So it's there, it's seamlessly expressed in that, but to where we want to go. So that's why it's there, but not so clean, so direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we then playing it safe? Are political parties playing it safe? You earlier said that, Jorge. No, it's when we look at our electoral setup, the model that we're currently using, first past the post, winner takes it all. So numbers are going to be very, very important, of course, in a game of politics. And to get those numbers is to, in a way, come up with a utilitarian kind of approach where it's the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people.
Exactly.
Does that work to speak to gender and human rights issues?
I don't think it does, because a lot of gender and human rights issues are about not just marginalized tribes, but oftentimes tribes which are in a minority in terms of numbers. And I think a human rights approach, for me, says no matter how small the minority, it has to be protected, right? Because the Constitution, where we derive our rights, says every person in Botswana will be accorded equality. Every person will enjoy privacy. Every person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it speaks to every person, and every person should not be about the dictates of the majority or what the many will say, or the position of the majority. It has to be about ensuring that every single person on this land, enjoys.
Just wonder what that party is going to deal with when they talk about issues of human rights. So many issues on representation, like you've mentioned, but no one is explicitly saying that if I'm caught by the police, I could get free representation in this 1, 2, 3 sense, or packaged in this way. So you find that it's too broad. They're selling us broad ideas. And with a broad idea, for people who are inquisitive, myself, for people who want to know more or really understand what the party is trying to communicate, it then we come to the conclusion that there's a fall short of communication on issues of human rights. It's too broad. We're playing it safe as politicians.
Yeah. I mean, just to add on to what she's just said, I think in terms of a gendered approach to the manifestos, what I would expect to see is a consideration of why gender is important to consider, right? Preface that with, we understand, there has to be an understanding by political leadership of the historical oppressions of our marginalized communities, including women, right? And marginalization on the basis of either sexuality or gender, right? And that's not there. So there's a lot of solutions, but they're solving problems that are not and so they're solving problems, but they don't have that understanding that there are other people who experience this problem in a layered way, in a way that if you are saying we're going to get from step 1 to step 2, there are people who are at step -3 who you need to consider getting, first of all, to step 1 before you can then get us to step 2.
Right.
And I think that particularly in our society that is admittedly as admitted by the manifestos themselves, patriarchal, there needs to be that deeper thinking of when we say we are going to create equality, is that going to be sufficient, and who is it going to?
And monitoring.
For me, I would say we need to now start appreciating and embracing deeply, like we used to in the olden times after we got our independence, the NGOs. Because they're the ones that could essentially really rigorously help us get the monitoring and evaluation that is much needed. And I'm not talking about your white elephants that are already just registered. I'm not talking about those that already have political infiltration. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about NGOs that are there, that have been vocal about controversial issues, and have picked units within our communities, women, young girls, men. There are other men who are experiencing a certain level of abuse or a certain level of violence.
Right.
Those are the people that we should be talking to when it into the door and says, I've been experiencing abuse. I've been married for 15 years. These are the bruises.
Right. Thank you so much, Mostana Khape. I have a minute and a half. So in that minute and a half,
The contract.
fulfillment of contract,
Yes.
meeting of minds,
Yes.
all those essential
Yes.
elements.
I mean, I think when we go, ke le Motlhophi, ha ke a go tlhopha o e leng gore ke a Motlhopha, mo Palamente. I go into it with an understanding that there are certain promises, there are certain undertakings that they have made, right? So my vote is in essence me signing over terms of reference, right? And agreeing, getting into an agreement with them when they ascend into leadership, that they will then do what they have undertaken to do. And, you know, in project management, you understand that there are processes, or in the process of project management, you understand that there are points at which you stop and you look back and you say, is this working? Is it not working? Where do we need to improve? And I think that ke le Motlhophi, ke tshwanetse gore ke nne le maikarabelo ao, a gore I have to have that relationship with my legislator, right? And they have to have that relationship with me as well.
Right.
To say, let's check back.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Erra. That's good. Erra. Ko Kavimba. Ke ngwanyana ko Kavimba ke mosadi ko Borolong. Oh, Mace is my brother. He's ke ngwana ga rre mogolo. That's my brother. Nchunga ma. Ke rangwane. Yeah.
I went to school in Kavimba, that's why I know this.
Oh.
Go pro-choice. Let's go pro-choice. But I doubt it will be pro-choice. It will be pro-life. But in any case, even if we say pro-life, okay, Ghana there's a slippery slope as that pretty much means for the, if you agree in this aspect, for the, this is the case, then you're going to contradict yourself if at all you're going to carry the same argument in another aspect. So let's see what you really think of this.
Let's go all the way.
Hey, let's go all the way. I know about pro-life. Okay, then let's talk about life. What constitutes life? Is the gamete a conception? When that magic happens, is that life?
Is that life?
Yeah. Or what? How do you look at it biologically? Do you look at it spiritually? What happened to life? And then there was life. You know, so it brings to the fore some of the very difficult questions that we need to have as a people.
And we're avoiding them.
And we're avoiding them. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you guys so very much. Let me see you out. There's extra. hot.
So in both directions. Just from the city. Oh, I did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Today.
Yeah, no, it did. It did. It did.
Hari kujar tu kon switcher. Fatima. Uwan ni. From the wall, like from the wall.
So I don't think we should remove them. I guess because winter.
Like